Happy Hour is, it's a monthly informal community building event and learning event for founders, entrepreneurs, and innovators that we launched in January of 2017. And I was doing the math tonight, and that actually makes tonight our 50th happy hour that we've had since launching in 2017. So woohoo. Laura, can you do a little woohoo for us? So in there you go. In pre-COVID days, let's see. We used to meet in a bar or restaurant, and most of the time it was like at Hot Italian in Midtown. And actually in the top right photo on that one, I think that might actually be Brandon Brown, like from several years ago when we had him in person. But since April of 2020, we've been doing this virtually. And so we try to do the best we can and still connect founders to each other and to a veteran entrepreneur who's been there and done that, and allow you the opportunity to get your questions answered. So we do that through the interviews that we're going to do tonight. Startup SAC or Startup Happy Hour is a collaboration between Startup SAC and the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Sac State. Startup SAC, for those of you who don't know, is a nonprofit whose mission is all about accelerating Sacramento's startup and innovation ecosystem. And I'm going to turn it over to Cameron Law to talk a little bit about the Carlson Center.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff and Laura, for the partnership. We are, honored to be a partner of Startup Happy Hour, and especially celebrating 50 years and all that you've, or 50 sessions, 50 years. It seems like as an ecosystem builder, 50 years that I imagine you feel like you've been doing this. But yeah, so appreciate the partnership. But we at the Carlson Center, we serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to scale and launch their businesses. And I'm joined by two of my team members. I have Arlene Miranda here, as well as Brian Gladden. And so we're here to support you no matter where you're at in that entrepreneurial journey. And we are, active partners with Startup SAC, as well as many of the other ecosystem support organizations. So feel free to reach out and connect with us. A quick plug, we do have our virtual entrepreneurship toolkit series running starting next week. It's a 5-part series where we'll break down the core elements of the lean canvas, as well as a number of other tools that will help you turn your idea into a successful business model. So we look forward to seeing you then, and appreciate you all being here. So take it away, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Cameron. So as I said, Startup SAC is a nonprofit, and we are funded by the generosity of several sponsors that you should be able to see on your screen now. So I'd like to appreciate them and recognize them. They are SMUD, Witten Law, Bender Insurance Solutions, Nivagen, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Holcomb Law, Clifton Larson Allen, Moneta Ventures, and Ernst & Young. And bear with me now, I've got a special video I'd like to play from SMUD. You can still see the video, Cameron?
We can see the video, yeah.
Okay.
My friends and I think about the future a lot.
And it's looking brighter.
Because SMUD's improving our air.
Helping the planet.
And using technology and new ideas to power healthy communities.
Where we can all live, work, and play.
By 2030, SMUD will be 100% carbon-free, so you can live in a clean power city. Join the charge with SMUD at cleanpowercity.org.
All right, so thanks again to SMUD and to all our sponsors. So without your support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Okay, let's see, has Brandon returned?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Awesome. So let me just do a couple of quick things here. So the main portion of the show is, like I said, an interview with a veteran startup founder who's been there, done that, and had some success in our region. And tonight, I'd like to welcome Brandon Brown, who is the CEO of and co-founder or founder? I think co-founder, right?
Co-founder, yeah. Started the company
of Grin. So as I mentioned, we had Brandon at a Startup Happy Hour in person, I believe a few years ago at Hot Italian in Midtown. And you've come a long way since then. And I'd like to just start off, for people who don't know, weren't familiar with what Grin is, what you guys do. Can you give us kind of a brief intro to what Grin is all about?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's love what you guys are doing with the Sacramento startup ecosystem. And thanks everybody for joining today, and love to see there's a couple folks from the Grin team on the call. So thanks guys for hopping on. So Grin is a SaaS platform for creator management. We started in influencer marketing, and now we're basically pioneering a new software category in the creator economy called creator management. Influencer marketing, for those that don't know, is when brands work with social media creators on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, etc., to really create branded content and drive outcome on behalf of the brand. And yeah, it's a software business. We're working right now on, like I said, repositioning the company into the broader creator economy. The basic idea with the creator management platform is we believe that, the world has fundamentally changed in that consumer attention has moved from traditional TV, radio, kind of company-owned media into mobile social, where consumers are really tuning into people. And this is just a fundamental change in the way that all modern brands need to operate. And a creator management platform is a system of record that allows for brands to work with all types of social media creators they work with to do things like influencer marketing, affiliate marketing, create branded content, customer advocacy, etc. So the team's at about 300, a little over 300 people. A year ago, we were at probably mid 60s. The company's valued at $1 billion. So we're a unicorn now. We've raised 145 million to date. We're growing very rapidly. So last year, we grew just under 200% year over year. We're in a very large market that's, like I said, anchored by a fundamental shift in the way the world works. And so, we believe that, this company will scale into a very large standalone company that is around for generations. And I'm from Sacramento. So while we're remote now, about a third of the team is in Sacramento. So it's about 100 people in Sacramento, and about 200 are all remote now. But our headquarters in Sacramento is where we have all of our meetings, and I spend a lot of my time there.
Very cool. So there was a couple things that kind of struck me there. You said you're a unicorn now, which I don't know that Sacramento has officially acknowledged any startup, Sacramento-focused based startups. But I haven't seen a story about that. So has the Biz Journal or nobody covered that?
Yeah, it hasn't really been. Yeah, it hasn't been covered. So we reached that status through a very small round we did that was private, and we didn't publicize it, but it was with a handful of social media creators and celebrities that invested at that valuation. Our last institutional round, the valuation was 910 million post money, but we just closed a small amount of capital at $1 billion, which officially, I guess, makes us a unicorn. we haven't done a bunch of press around it.
That is very cool. I was just telling Laura the other day how you were on my short list to be the first Sacramento unicorn. I think you guys, and I think Trifecta, Greg over at Trifecta, right? I was like, who's going to be the first unicorn? So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, but I appreciate it. It's really, I think, about the team. Got a good team that knows what they're doing and is making it happen.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I'm kind of curious, what your background is? Did you always aspire to be an entrepreneur? Did you have any ventures before launching Grin? What kind of led you onto the entrepreneurial path?
Well, so I grew up, I don't know, for those people, some of the people on this call I've actually known for a long time, but I grew up in action sports. So I grew up like snowboarding and skating. And so I've always, I think, been kind of a risk taker. And ever since I was young, I always felt like that I would build companies. Like I would be an entrepreneur and I would go and kind of chart my own path and build companies, but I wasn't quite sure how it would happen. In college, I had, I think, kind of like an entrepreneurial spirit in that I was throwing lots of parties. I was like running the snowboarding club. I was doing lots of the concerts that would come into town. And that actually led me to get my first job, which was very kind of transformative and made a big impression on me, where I started working in marketing at Red Bull. And so I started doing that in college. It was before social media was really huge. And through that, I think I saw at that company, like people who aren't afraid to take big risks, people who like challenge the status quo, people who create projects that are seemingly impossible. And I think that made a big impression on me. I also developed a very kind of distinct point of view around how do you collaborate with people on behalf of brands to drive marketing outcome, which is essentially what working with creators on social media is, to do influencer marketing. And so I got to a point in my career where it was really right, like feeling like if I didn't make a move and make a leap, then I would have regrets. And so decided to leave and start Grin. But I think probably the most formative experience I would say is my career at Red Bull and the people that I was around in that organization.
And working in the marketing department certainly had to have influenced some of the work you've done at Grin, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of joke to people, like when I'm talking to investors or potential employees, it's like, I'm a marketer who sells a marketing software product to marketers. It's like, it's literally what we do. I've been in marketing my whole life. Our product enables marketing for marketers inside brands. So, I mean, I'm a CEO, which there's like general management responsibilities as a CEO, but fundamentally, like my background is in marketing.
So, curious about the origins of Grin. What year did you launch? And I know you've pivoted, and I can't remember the original idea, but I know that you and your co-founder pivoted pretty early, and it was a pretty significant pivot. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2014, and we wanted to move in. It was kind of early days before influencer and creator was a big thing. The first product that we were building was basically a cross-promotion marketplace for YouTubers. So the idea was like big YouTuber promote small YouTuber in exchange for money. And it got good traction. We were able to generate some results around it. But pretty quickly, a couple of years into that process, we started to realize that it wasn't going to work. There was some basically fundamental flaws in the business that we felt like couldn't be overcome. That's, if you've ever started a company, it's a pretty kind of painful realization that what you're working on isn't going to work, and there's actual data and signals that show you that it's probably not able to power through it. So what we did was we looked at kind of the market spaces that we thought were interesting. Influencer marketing was one of those. Like I said, I had a point of view around how do you drive marketing outcome through people and do it in a really authentic way. And my view was always, based on my time at Red Bull, that the brand needs to have a relationship with the person who's doing the endorsement, whether it's a blogger or an athlete. Like the brand needs to actually have a relationship with that, and they need to use the product. And most of the solutions in influencer marketing were all these hyper transactional marketplaces. We call them middlemen. And so we're like, well, we think this should actually be more like software system of record that enables the brand to go direct to creators rather than be the middleman in between, because we think it will lead to better outcomes. So with that insight, we pivoted the company, moved into this space, rebuilt the team, launched the product, and we did that in 2017. And then from there, started generating traction and momentum. So while the company's been around for 8 years, this product's been around for, I think, 4.5, something like 5, something like that.
I assume that's got to be a pretty significant tech shift from the technical side of the platform. Was your co-founder a technical co-founder? Did you build this yourself? Did you outsource this? That's a question that a lot of founders have, is how they have an idea, they got the business side of it figured out, or they think they do, and they want to build it. So how did you go about the technical side of building the platform and pivoting that?
So originally we had outsourced all of our development, and then through the pivot, we recruited a new CTO, who's also my brother, who's a really talented full stack engineer. And so he joined the org as like a third co-founder in really late 2016, and started building the product with another engineer. But we basically brought in another co-founder to help us on the technical side, and join the company. And I think without that addition, it would have been very hard to make the pivot. I want to think that we would have been able to make it work, but who knows, right? Hindsight's 2020.
And so I assume you said you got over 300 employees now. I assume that the tech team has got to be a pretty big part of that.
Yeah, the R&D is probably 70. I don't know, Kevin's on the call. He's our head lead recruiter, give or take. And we're actually growing R&D faster than any other org right now. So we're adding engineers and product managers.
Your dev is all in-house versus originally it was outsourced.
That's right. Yeah,
okay.
It's all in-house. We have VPs across engineering and product, directors, managers, etc. And all the engineers are full-time based in the US.
And where you said you're distributed virtually, but where in theory is in the Sacramento region is the Grin headquarters?
We work out of the WeWork, so out of Capitol Mall there
Okay.
on 4th and Capitol. Yeah,
Okay.
so we have an office space back there. Anyone who works in Sacramento has the ability to go in there. I have an office in there. And then although we didn't end up doing this, we had our first summit planned for the first week of January, but we had to cancel it because of COVID. But the idea is that the leadership team meets quarterly in Sacramento, and then the whole company will meet semi-annually here in Sacramento for all of our on-sites.
Okay. So at what point in the life cycle did you decide that you needed to raise external funding? And I'm kind of curious, that's one of the most common questions we have from startups and people attending these events is they want to know about how to raise money, how to pitch investors, how to get that first seed round and Series A. Can you tell us about that experience you had in raising external funding?
Yeah, so I mean, this question comes up a lot, right? So for anyone on the call who's like building a company or thinking about building a company, fundraising is like an obvious gating item. The first question I would ask myself is, what type of company are you trying to build, right? Because venture capital only works if the outcomes are monster. So because of the way venture capital funds and work, is we all know they make lots of investments, lots of bets, most of them fail, but then the one or two that do deliver can return the entire fund. So if they're investing out of a $500 million fund, the one or two that win can return the entire $500 million, and the really good ones can return like 5-10x the fund, like the Ubers and the big ones. So the first question is like, what kind of company are you trying to build? So there's lots of really incredible, talented entrepreneurs, especially in Sacramento, that run cash flow positive businesses that are super valuable, and they're great operators, and they're going to generate a lot of wealth and solve a lot of problems that way. It's just a different model. For us, we've always wanted to build a really big company. And we decided early on that our goal isn't necessarily the monetary outcome. Like for us, it's about much more than just trying to create like a big financial liquidation event for people. We really wanted to try and go as big as possible, like test our personal limits. So, when we look back on this experience as co-founders, in 20 years, we've built something that we can really be proud of. And so we felt like raising venture capital accelerates us on that mission. But I would say that's kind of first and foremost, is make sure that you want to build a big company. The second I would say is that fundraising is just incredibly hard, especially when you're not from the Bay Area, and if you're not from like an Ivy League school. Like I went to Chico State, I'm from Sacramento, and it's gotten progressively easier, but it's a very hard thing to do. And so I think, for me, like the early days of fundraising, and even not even long ago, it's just constant rejection. It's just constant no's, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of no's in a row. And so when you're the founder who's building a company trying to fundraise, like it's very hard to not somehow confuse like your personal self-worth with the company. Like it's not because I'm doing something wrong, even though it feels that way. And so I think it's to be totally frank, it's painful. At least it was painful for me. And now the outcome is great looking back on it, right? It's working, it sounds great, but it was a very arduous, painful, icky process. That wasn't fun.
An icky process. There's a quote for it. So what top one or two pieces of advice would you give to founders looking to raise external funding?
So I'd say fundraising is all about traction and momentum. Like you need to have a story and all this, but really investors invest in growth. And so you can overcome major objections around your market, your skill set, your ability to run a company. You can honestly have kind of a bad story if you can show growth. And so once you're like, the pre-product market fit fundraising is different, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell an idea and a vision, trying to find product market fit. The second that you have inklings of like something working and channels that work, I would just invest into growth and scaling it, and then raise on traction. And so that I think is probably like the core thing you need to deliver is some North Star metric, whether it's users, best one's probably revenue, but doesn't always have to be revenue. And then you need to show your ability to demonstrate month over month growth against that. And I think that if you can do that, then you can solve a lot of the problems around fundraising. If you don't have traction, it's going to be very hard to raise.
Good piece of advice. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you went through the launch accelerator. Is that right? Jason Calacanis's accelerator. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's right. So we got connected with Jason. Actually, I got introduced to him through a local Sacramento entrepreneur.
Was that Sonny that did that?
That's right. Yeah, Sonny. I love Sonny. He's great. Yeah, he's awesome. Just great person. And he introduced me to Jason, and then we went through his accelerator, which I would describe as like a fundraising accelerator. And it was worthwhile for us.
Any tips, advice on people trying to get into an accelerator? Same as the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got in because we had traction, and the terms like weren't great for us. Like you could say that, like at the time it would be, you could say it was a bad deal. It wasn't a bad deal, but there's dilution associated with it, right? But the way I looked at it was like, I'm paying to break into a network. This was pre-COVID, before you could fundraise on Zoom, and I knew that in order to raise capital consistently, I had to go build a network outside of Sacramento, because I love Sacramento and I'm going to continue to invest in Sacramento and mentor and build companies here. But access to capital is just, there's only a few investors. And so you're really, it's hard to raise from here, because if two of them pass, and you're kind of like, who next? But in San Francisco, there's literally, you can't even meet with them all. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Excuse me. So you mentioned earlier some just phenomenal growth. I think you said you were like 60 employees a year ago. You're over 300 now. You've just you're just killing it as far as the growth, but that has to come with some real challenges as far as how do you deal with such rapid growth? How do you deal with onboarding so many employees and such a change in the culture has got to happen in the organization? What are some of the biggest challenges you've had to face in the past year with that growth, and what's been key to overcoming those?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the term product market fit, but product market fit it basically describes the point that you have a product that solves a problem in a large market, and the market wants to pay you for the product. And so there's a difference between building a company pre-product market fit and post-product market fit. Pre-product market fit, the problems are really around discovering problems and then designing solutions through technology that can solve those problems, and then figuring out if people will pay for it and buy it. And then once you've solved the problem that people want to buy, then it turns into this, right? How do we create growth, predictable growth? I think what I found is that post-product market fit, once the team got to like 20 to 25 people, like communication starts to break down. People are unsure like what the priorities are. How do the priorities map to the strategy? I think the org starts getting paralyzed around like slow decision-making. People don't have context to why the early decisions were made. And so you get into this situation where you have an organism that's like trying to grow, but it doesn't have clarity around how to grow, because it's like creating problems within itself. So the way that we have battled this is have very clear mission, vision, values. So we have a very clear core purpose for the company, and a vision for how we see the world, and a set of values. And everything that we do in the organization maps back to that. And I just constantly repeat myself. So like if like I see Haley and Kevin are both on this call, like they're in every single one of our monthly all hands. Like I give the same presentation every single month, and people think it's repetitive, but it's not repetitive, because it's why we exist and where we're going. So you need to have very clear mission, vision, values. Then what I did was I started hiring VPs who have been through this level of scale. So I'm like, okay, look, I'm already learning on the job. My co-founder's learning on the job. Last thing I need is a bunch of leaders who are also learning on the job. That seems like a recipe for failure. So we had a very like explicit hiring filter. If you're leading a function, you have to have already done it before. And so what you get is people who've like seen this movie before. They can see around the corner. They know where the pitfalls are. And then I think you have to make sure the values are going to create the type of behavior you want. And then you have to reinforce them. And for us, that ends up like owning mistakes very quickly, right? Killing projects that aren't working, getting bad people out who don't map to the values. And so you use the values as a way to kind of filter. And I found like that actually works quite well. If people know very clearly why we exist and where we're going, And then you have really strong leaders who've already kind of seen this movie before. And then you have a filtering system for how you make decisions in the company, which map to the values. Then like the team can solve a lot of the problems. That's how we've approached scaling. And there's a bunch of other tactical stuff, but like cash flow management and all that. But I think those are like the very high level kind of CEO objectives that I would set.
Well, as far as from the employee standpoint, I think you guys had a all company meeting a little while ago, and I saw a post of yours on LinkedIn where you were raving about that, and I was just impressed by how all the people, your employees, were just raving about how Grin is such a great place to work. So I think you're definitely, it sounds like you're doing something right there, and really creating a team and atmosphere that people love to be in. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I guess I kind of want to switch gears a little bit now, from so much Grin to you're involved in the entrepreneur in residence at the Growth Factory, along with several other local rock star entrepreneurs. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the experience that you're having there and elsewhere of helping other entrepreneurs in the region here.
Yeah, so Mark Haney, who is involved in the Growth Factory, is an early investor in Grin. And so he's running the Growth Factory, as probably a lot of people on this call know. He's been just a great partner, super optimistic, positive, kind of believed in the company before others. And then someone who's become a very close friend of mine, who was one of the founders of Skyslope, which is based in Sacramento. His name's DJ Steffen. He is helping the Growth Factory as well, with kind of mentoring. So I got involved, and I think for me it's really about, like, there's not a lot of venture-backed companies in Sacramento. There's a lot of people who raise private equity or do kind of private equity buyouts and then continue to run profitable. There's not a lot of venture track companies that are on a path to potentially IPO one day, which we are. And so for me, it's really about like trying to help share a playbook around building a venture track company, that you can actually do it from a market like Sacramento, because we're proving that. And then giving people a framework where if they do want to go this path, that there's a company to look at and people to get in touch with that can help kind of guide you along that path. And so I'm engaging in, mentoring and coaching sessions with them, really around, mostly around fundraising and how to raise capital from outside the Bay Area, and how, like, the metrics to think about and things like that. I think that's a great thing for this area. I think accelerators and early stage groups like that really are kind of the lifeblood of new companies in the future.
You mentioned DJ, and I think he was actually at that in-person event a couple of years ago. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit how important it's been, how critical it is for a startup founder to have those mentors and coaches kind of guiding you, just like you're doing with others right now, and you've had people mentor you. Maybe explain to other founders how critically important that is, if you believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think I've constantly seeked out people who are just like a few years ahead of me where I want to be. So in the early stages, that was just like early stage companies. And now as the company's gotten bigger, I've seeked out other people. I think the main thing is just, if you find people who've already seen the problems, they can give you a perspective that's grounded in experience, which I think is like the most valuable perspective. It doesn't mean that you're going to take their perspective all the time, because you may have a different opinion, but at least like they've seen the problem before and they can give you something that's rooted in experience. So I think it's critical. Like, the way that I've always done that is just cold outreach to people. DJ and like Greg and Tyler and some other people I got connected through the network in Sacramento. But to this day, I still cold outreach to people. Like, an example is I've gotten to know Godard Abel, who's the CEO of G2, really well over the last few months. And him and I catch up probably once every 3 or 4 weeks. And he's built and sold 3 companies, one to Mark Benioff. G2's, a unicorn. He's great leader, entrepreneur, really talented CEO. And so I get on with calls with him and I'm like, hey, look, like, how are you thinking about strategic planning in a company that's 550 people? Like, how did you think about like up-leveling your leadership team, and where did you consolidate direct reports under C-level leaders and at what time? These are like the problems that I'm thinking through. And he's a few years ahead of me and has done it a few times, so he can provide feedback. So to me, it's been critical. And I've always done that, and I've done it just proactively on my own to try to like solve problems and be solution oriented.
Cool. So I think I just have a couple more questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. But you've mentioned that you're from Sacramento, Chico State grad, you're rooted here locally. Kind of curious, a lot of people, a lot of the advice is move to the Silicon Valley, move to the Bay Area. But what is keeping you, just talk about what's keeping you in the greater Sacramento region? What are some of the assets and pros of staying here in the region that you're finding that are keeping you here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so for me, like I grew up in Folsom. I'm in my mid 30s. I moved to Folsom when it was like not even a big town. I remember it really well. Folsom's a suburb of Sacramento if people aren't from Sacramento. And so I've always had like a big passion for Sacramento. I think if you really care about a region, and you guys like, so Laura and Jeff, like you guys do so much for the Sacramento region. Like I'm so thankful for it. My way to contribute is if I can build a company that, let's say, like our ambitions, at some point we go public and the company is worth 10, 20, 30 billion dollars and the platform is in Sacramento, like that changes the region in a super dramatic way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you create thousands of jobs, you prove to people that it can be done. A lot of people are like, hey, look, I know Brandon, like he did it, why can't I do it? And so you start to spur innovation. And so for me, like there's a lot of tactical things you could say, like, oh, operating costs are lower, proximity to Bay Area is great because you can just go meet investors in the afternoon and come home. You can like, arguably like quality of life is better. Talent is more loyal in that like you don't have people hopping from company to company like you do in major markets. Those are all very real reasons, but for me, it's much more about like passion for the area, trying to blaze a trail such that other people can kind of use what we're doing as a framework and a playbook and give back to the region kind of indirectly by building a big venture-backed company here that eventually, never say never, but one day can go public and people can look to as like, hey, look, it can be done from Sacramento.
Very cool. Love hearing that. Love the idea of having this big tech company anchored here in Sacramento. I think that'd be really great for our community. So I'm going to ask one last question, then open it up. And that last question is, what's the top piece of advice? You talked about raising capital, but what's the top piece of advice you give to aspiring entrepreneurs just starting their company?
I kind of already touched on it. It's really around traction. I think you can use growth as a compass. So really like you need the first thing is like you need to figure out how to find predictable growth, which means you need to solve a problem and then figure out how to sell it in a predictable way. But I think as soon as you start to get inklings of that, like you can orient the whole company around growth. Like growth should be your number one goal. Like growth is a very useful compass because it filters through all of the subjective opinions, decision-making, feedback, like it's rooted in data. And so for me, I would look at growth, whatever you're trying to drive, and I would use it as a decision-making kind of framework in the company. Like, is this actually helping enable us to grow faster? Yes or no? And I think when you think about growth as a North Star like that, it's actually quite an effective tool because a lot of the things that you're doing in these kind of critical early stage months, which are everybody typically is running out of cash, like no one has enough money to make it very long. And so you're constantly fighting this like treadmill in the early days. That's super scary. And I think if you can orient the company around driving growth and use it as a filter for all the decisions you make, I think you'll be like 99% ahead of most people because most people get lost in a bunch of things that don't really matter. Like the only thing that really matters is growth if you're trying to build a company that can raise venture financing.
Cool. Very cool. Good advice. So as promised, I'm going to now open it up to the audience. And I know Laura's been monitoring chat, and I'm sure Cameron and Arlene are too. So Laura, do you have a list of questioners lined up?
I think there's only one question in the chat right now. So why don't we go with that one? Almas, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I would like to ask you about how to find your
Almost,
first investor today
almost.
when nobody want to invest to the situation in the world.
He's breaking up, so you're gonna need to type that in the
So
chat, I think.
the question is, how do you find your first angel investor today when nobody wants to invest due to the situation in the world?
Well, nobody's a very loaded term because there's 3 billion. How many people are in the world? There's billions of people in
7
the world.
billion.
Yeah. So, look, it's hard. Like, it is super hard. Like I said, the unfortunate reality, I'm a little jaded from like early stage fundraising, as you guys can tell. Where's that quote? Like, the only way out is through. Like, there is no shortcut. Like, you have to build a product, you have to sell it, and then you have to meet with hundreds of people, and you probably have to hear 150 to 200 no's in a row, and then you'll get one yes. But that one yes, well, then next time you'll have to only meet with 99 people. And the next time you only have to meet with 48 people. And then it will get easier, but there's no way around it. So yeah, build a product, drive growth, and then meet with lots of investors. And most of them don't want to invest. That's fine. Like, especially people who do a lot of investing, especially if they're institutional, like, their job is to say no. Like, if they're institutional investors, pretty much all they do is say no. They just say no, 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 no. That's like their job. They have so much deal flow. So I would just say,
is it basically just a numbers game? You just gotta go out and hit up so many people, and it's just a matter of hitting up enough that you finally get that yes.
Yeah, I think so. And then you iterate and improve on the story along the way, and hopefully you show traction and growth. But it is really early stages, a numbers game, and you got to improve after every meeting and just work at it. But you can do it. You can 100% do it. 100%. You can do it. Just takes effort and energy.
I think Lord is Alex the next question.
Well, Arlene's got her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go, Arlene.
Hi there. I just wanted to know if you do anything specific or what your hiring process is, because I can hear that you value your culture and you want to maintain it. And yet your growth has been phenomenal over the course of a year. How do you manage that in the hiring process?
Well, one, we have a great people ops team. So one who's on this call, but we have a great VP of people who's really credentialed and talented, was formerly at AOL and other companies. I think, so outside of kind of process, tactical execution, and there's like a lot of things we could go into, how we recruit, how we manage the funnel, all that. But probably the number one thing is we don't compromise on values ever. Like, it does not matter how experienced you are. If you, through the interview process, signal to us that you don't share the same values as the company, we will not hire you. And if in the company you start to violate the values, we will fire you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's go to Alex, who had a question in the chat, and then we'll go to Abu Bakr. Alex, do you want to unmute yourself, or it's a question about KPIs?
I'm driving right now. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me clearly or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so especially early on startups, what are some key performance indicators you guys track to see you are on track for the growth? I can assume one of them will be user signups, but what others are? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So we're SaaS, which stands for software as a service. So the number one thing that matters the most is growth rate. What drives growth rate is gross new sales and net revenue retention. So we track gross new sales, so how much pipeline and sales is the sales team generating, and then net revenue retention, which is a function of renewals and then upsells and cancellations. And then the other thing I would say is we track sales efficiency, so customer acquisition costs and customer acquisition cost payback. So how fast, on a monthly basis, can we recoup our CAC? So growth rate, gross retention, net retention, CAC payback.
Cost of acquisition is CAC, if nobody knows.
Yeah, customer acquisition cost, exactly. And then customer acquisition payback is how many months, if I spend $10,000 to acquire a customer and they pay me $1,000 a month, that means I get my customer acquisition cost back in 10 months. So the more that I can compress that in a recurring revenue business, the better. So we track that very religiously.
Cool.
All right.
Great question.
Abu Bakr is next.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I have a somewhat of a two-part question. One is, how and when did you know you needed funding? And the second part is, you're somewhat changing like the entire marketing sector in a way. And how did you influence the customer that your method or this is like a new way of doing things, the culture change?
Yeah. So how do we know we need funding? So I wish there was like early on, it was like a function of, we want to build a big company and we're actually running out of money. So we have to like do something. But then I think the thing outside of running out of money, which no one wants to run out of money because then you have to shut the company down, is you will have signals around like basically profitable unit economics. So depending kind of what the business model in your business is, if you just Google kind of KPIs and metrics in a marketplace business or in a SaaS business or in a consumer business, like, or an e-commerce business, you can get KPIs around what good benchmark unit economics look like. And once you start to show signals around the math in my business is working, then it makes sense to go raise money. And then, yeah, you're right in that we are operating at like the bleeding edge of kind of marketing and MarTech. We've spent a lot of time with really kind of category creation and category dynamics. And so if you spend some time on our website, you'll see a lot of stories and videos around the category that we're building called creator management. And one of the books that was super transformative for me on that topic is a book called Play Bigger. That really influenced how we think about category dynamics positioning for the company. And the Play Bigger concepts have been kind of woven throughout the whole company.
Thank you so much.
Good questions.
Okay, Farid, you're up.
Hello, Brandon. I'm Farid, and we've been investing in startups from Europe and helping them, like with a global potential, helping them to move to United States. And I'm also very passionate about Sacramento because I'm a graduate from here and stuff like that. Although I'm from Europe, I live here now. So one of the startups we have is has an influencer platform, which we tested in Europe. It went really well. And that's for the influencers for their giveaways. So they have this gamified way of giving away the gifts or whatever. So I see some things that we can do with Grin. So I was wondering, who's the right person in Grin that we can talk to about partnering on some totally kind of away from you guys, but also integrate to you guys. So some sort of a business, something completely new, but it's a very starting up and has some traction and something it did in Europe already. So we know that it is likable, but I don't know how it is going to be accepted in US. So that's just a challenge we have.
I like it. I like the hustle. That's what I would do too. Just shoot me an email, brandon.b@grin.co. We are not building lots of products for the creator side currently, but in the future we intend to. So I'm happy to look at it and then share it with our VP of product and or our VP of marketing, depending what the partnership could look like. But it sounds like a super interesting platform.
Sure.
So
I sent you your LinkedIn request already. So if you accept him, I'll write you more details there, and then we go from there. And I'll explain you what it is more. You will like it.
Yeah, it sounds good. If you could email me, it would be better. LinkedIn is like a little.
All right. So what was the email again? Can you repeat the email, please, again?
I'll put it in the chat for you.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you, Brandon.
Yep.
Okay, Zaid, if I said that right, you're up.
Hey, Brandon. I just had a question about your story as an entrepreneur. Usually when we hear about the top names like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos, they always talk about how they had a couple failed businesses. And when you were telling your story, you said you went from Red Bull, and I think it was straight out of Grin, but did you have any companies that you started that failed and you kind of had to, keep it as something you look back on, or was it just starting off with Grin and it worked out from the first shot?
Yeah, good question. So I started a marketing agency called Loring that basically failed first. I realized pretty quickly that wasn't the business I wanted to be in and got out of it. And then I kind of think about Grin as like two companies. the first version of Grin, we could have very easily shut down and called Grin 2.0 something different, but we didn't want to do it because of the cap table and the investors. We felt like these people invested in us, and so we should continue to move forward without, I guess, what we felt like wouldn't be a high integrity thing to do. So I really kind of think of it as I've had two companies before Grin. First was a marketing agency. Second was the first version of Grin that we had to pivot away from. But yeah, I think it is a common story where, yeah, you just fail a lot. And if you just don't give up, like eventually I think you will make it.
All right, let's see. Pei-Chen, you're up.
Hey, Brandon, congratulations on the raise, man.
Thanks.
Awesome. So how did you go about getting all those hundreds of meetings with the investors? Just cold calling them? How'd you get them?
Yeah, good question. So it kind of evolved over time. It started with just basically ping-ponging coffees. So a lot of the angel investors started in Sacramento. It would be like, hey, here's our pitch, we're fundraising. And then most of the times they'd be like, oh, well, I'm interested or I'm not interested. And I would always say, is there anyone that you can introduce me to? And then I met like a few kind of key people that probably made 15 to 20 introductions each. That ended up being like kind of linchpins in it, and or however you want to describe that. And then the accelerator that I joined with Jason was really helpful for the Bay Area investors, because I was at that point living in an Airbnb in San Francisco and just meeting investors constantly. And that got me kind of fast tracked into that network. But again, it's a lot of just ping pong, coffees, people know people, and getting introductions one by one. And then after, you do that for a few years, you end up building like a big kind of network of people.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, Phil, you're up. You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Brandon. I'm Phil. I came 3 weeks ago from Poland, just to Silicon Valley to start to build my startup, my idea. I'm very passionate about that, determined. Yeah, that's why I'm here. I want to ask you, where's your next meeting, online or in person, where I can continue to listen to you, to your,
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. That's super flattering. And if you want to spend some time together one-on-one, I'm happy to do it to the extent that I can. There's so many people that were super helpful in my journey early on. So if you want to shoot me an email directly, we can hop on a call any way I can be helpful. If I have the free time, I will. I'm actually doing with our team, I'm doing a webinar on Thursday with all of our customers. So I'll be on a webinar Thursday talking about how we think about kind of creator and creator economy stuff. But yeah, if you have specific questions, you can also hit me up direct.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll
write
you. I will send you an email for sure. Thank you.
All right, Mark with At My Home, you're up.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for being here. It's been really great so far, and congratulations on your company. So we're actually at my home. We're smart home creators. So I have a couple of questions about Grin. So do you match the brands with creators, or do they come with their own creators that you manage?
For the most part, they come with their own creators, the best customers, but we do have a suite of discovery tools that help them discover creators that are a good fit.
And a second part question, if you don't mind, I'm wondering, are there creators that get compensated in equity? And if they do they have to disclose that? Or how do they disclose that when they do their content?
We don't facilitate equity compensation. That is, I'm sure, occurring. I think like when I look at like a lot of the big consumer brands, or a lot of the fast growing consumer brands, a lot of times creators, they're positioned as like founders or partners, but really what they are is just equity-based comp. So the way that Grin works is you can pay people either with product, commissions, or cash. And any mix of all three, but we don't currently facilitate equity comp. But I think that makes sense. Like if you have the right partners and you really know they're a good long-term fit, I think that's a super interesting way to think about compensating them, because it aligns all the incentives.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I would love to
Yeah.
watch your webinar if you could put the link in the chat.
Yeah. Can you try to grab that, Haley, or someone from the team?
Yeah, and I
put it
think
in there.
Haley posted a link already in the chat, so you might want to
Oh,
scroll
okay.
through that. I don't
Great,
know if
thank
it's the one you're looking for or not.
Haley's on our sales team. She's just joined, so thank you.
Okay, all right, Leslie, you're up.
Hi there. Your success is very inspiring. We are looking to be the world's first global green alternative to Amazon, and it is a B2B2C and a B2C play. Looking for funding, and my question is, when you don't have the money to build the platform, and you obviously need a platform to show revenue, and you're needing the investment money to build the platform, obviously other ways to show traction. And so it's been difficult with finding and getting people to sign up as customers, sellers, and organizational clients so that we can at least show a list to investors, potential investors, and say, see, our other angle is we've started on a working prototype. And other than that, any other ideas either about, how to show traction that you have?
At that stage, so you may want to, if you've already explored this, you may want to just look at like clearly articulating the problem, the solution, your approach, and then the market opportunity, and then why you're uniquely positioned to go build the company. And then just try to raise like pre-revenue angel round and say, hey, look, like we're pre-revenue, this is the opportunity, and this is what I'm going to go get done with this. That I think would probably make the most sense, because I hear you. The other thing is, and everybody's different, but oftentimes like friends and family, and not to say that you have wealthy family or wealthy friends, but what that just really means is like people who don't typically invest, and like it could be like the guy who owns the restaurant that you always frequent, right? And I think getting in front of those people, sometimes they make early bets. So I think and then also so that's kind of one path, is I would say, think about like pre-revenue pitching process and investors and approach that. And then the other thing is like, how can we just reduce costs such that we can show certain signals? So like, how can we do it in like a super cost efficient way? And I don't want to say go into credit card debt or anything, but like how can we start to show momentum? And you might want to run like two parallel paths, but it's a super hard problem. But the other thing that should maybe give you confidence is like thousands of people solve that problem. So you can do it. You just got to apply some energy to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Good luck. That's our problem.
Thanks. Alex, you're up.
Thanks for hosting it. I have a second question for you. So you were saying earlier you were able to connect with the G2 CEOs to ask questions. How do you find that contact? Did you just email them, or you connect them on LinkedIn? What was your introduction process? And same way, like if someone wants to connect to you, how do they find you? How to set up this kind of just a chat stuff? Not necessarily like mentorship, but just if they have questions, like have a free chat with you or something. How do person do it?
Yeah, good question. So for me, I put my email in the chat. You could just email me directly, and I'll do my best to get back to you, especially for this group, just because we're all together. There's not that many people on this call. With Godard as an example, I saw an interview with him on LinkedIn where I was like, oh, this guy looks just really sharp. And then I just sent him a message and he said, hey, Godard, I just watched this interview with you. Like I'm building a company, like would love to just grab 15 minutes of your time and like share what I'm working on. And he got back to me and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then from there, I just built a relationship with him. And I've done similar things. Like I did a similar thing with, I got a mutual friend to introduce me to Ryan Dennehy from Electric. I got in touch with Fred so I've done this with like a handful of people. Most of the time it doesn't work, but sometimes it works. And the ones that do work, what I've found, like typically, like if a founder emails me, I'll usually try to make time for them, like even more than investors, because like so many people were like helpful in my kind of early journey that I have usually tried to prioritize that. And I think other people feel the same way. But that's just been my experience. That's how I got a hold of Goddard.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Sally and then Peachin.
Hi, Brandon. I have two questions. The first one is, in the early stage of the startup, is patent very important? Because the attorney told me he will probably charge me 15,000 just for the patent.
What type of business are you building?
I was trying to build some tech company related to credit.
So I'm going to have a very, I just have one perspective on this, which you should take with a grain of salt, because patents, I think, can be very valuable for real like technological innovation and breakthroughs that can be very valuable. For my business, they're completely worthless. I would never spend any money on it. My business is all about speed of execution and innovation and solving customer problems faster than competitors. That doesn't mean that patents can't be valuable. Like I know a company that, and they didn't have a patent, but they had like a technological advantage that they just had a great exit. And if they didn't have this technological advantage, I don't think they would have been able to sell their company. So I just think it really depends on the problem that you're solving and like where the value is, right? For me, like what we're doing is really about like workflow, system of record, efficiency. And there's really great tech around it, but there's nothing that's like proprietary necessarily. Our defensibility is around speed to scale, the way that we position the company, our integrations, and then brand. Like none of it is patents for me, but that's just one person. I don't really think they're worth much in early stage companies, but I'm also not a tech person, I'm a marketer.
Yeah, because they told me like I have to sign non-disclosure agreement every time when I need to talk to the investor. And I don't know if it works. Like, well, the investor would like to sign the non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, I would never sign an NDA with any investor ever. And any investor who tells you to sign an NDA doesn't know what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, just straight up, because investors don't sign NDAs because they see so many deals that they're gonna see competitive deals. And so any institutional investor that deploys a lot of capital will not sign an NDA. And if you send them an NDA, you probably won't get the meeting.
Okay. And a second question, because I still have a 9-to-5 job, and I'm doing that on like on a weekend. So I'm wondering, when could I really to like find a co-founder to speed up the startup, to speed up the launching the startup?
Where or when or what was the question?
Where? Because like I don't want to really, have to start up with my coworkers, but I just want to find someone who's probably good at marketing, or who's good at coding, like to launch the startup.
Yeah, that's a tough problem that a lot of people face. My suggestion would be just look through your personal network. Like, who are people that you've worked with in the past, people that you're connected to, and try to find someone that you have some sort of prior existing connection or relationship with to be a co-founder. The other way is, you could go on like a kind of cold outreach endeavor, but I'm not quite sure how that would work. For me, I had a prior relationship with my co-founder, Brian, who I started the company with, and that worked out well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Peachin, your turn.
It's me again, Brandon. So we're scaling up our affiliate marketing program. We've done very well with it so far, and we want to make it bigger. So I'd like to get your thoughts in terms of breadth versus depth, because we've spoken with some affiliate agencies, I guess you can say, and they were like, oh yeah, we can reach out to 200 affiliates, per unit time. We just think that we can't really build a good relationship with these folks when there's that many.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. Like, so the way that I would think about it is what's that called, the Pareto principle, like 80-20, right? Where 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. What I found is that influencer and affiliate converts revenue conversion in a similar fashion. it's kind of like venture portfolio theory, where like you'll work with 10 creators and pretty much like 7 or 8 of them will flop. One of them will return the whole budget, and then another one will return way more than the budget. And so I think there is something to be said about like a scaled approach, but once you start to get signals that something's working, that's where I think you really start to lean in and you go meet them in person, you have call, you know what I mean? And you start to say, hey, look, like we want to figure out how we can partner with you much more deeply in an ongoing basis. The other way to do it is you do that up front, and it takes longer, but I still think like you'll probably struggle with conversion. So I'd probably find a really low cost way to test more people at scale. And then the ones that work is where I lean into the long-term relationship.
Thanks.
Okay, we have a question from the chat. It's a follow-up question from Almas. He was the one who asked about, where do you find investors in today's world, basically. But this question is, a quote, you said it is a numbers game, but a day to day you run out of cash, even don't have enough money to pay your bills. Do we need to drop this way or struggle a bit more? Does that make sense? It's a numbers
Yeah, kind
game.
of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it's such a personal decision, right? Like based on your personal risk tolerance, and also what's your family situation? Is it worth the risk to you? Like, and I think what I can say is that being like anxious and nervous about running out of money and what that means as a startup founder is like a very normal experience. It doesn't make it any less hard or challenging, but it is very normal. So lots of people are going through those same experiences. But I also think, it has to do with your personal situation. I was fortunate enough that, I started our company at a time where I could take like really big personal risks. It's like, had I had a full family with children at that time, I don't know that I would have been as comfortable taking those risks. So I think you just have to really look at kind of your dynamic, what your bills are, and where your personal risk tolerance is. But the one thing I can say for sure is that like the anxiety, like the way I've heard it described is that startups are euphoria and terror, especially early stage, where it's like euphoria because you just get the big thing and you close the big customer and you're so excited, and then terror because you're like, oh my God, I'm running out of money. I'm not gonna be able to pay my bills. I'm gonna fail in front of everybody. And so I think that's unfortunately like, just kind of how it is. And I want to say it kind of goes away. It gets better as you get bigger, but it didn't really go away for me until like not that long ago. That feeling is just, I think, a normal feeling.
All right, Raul, you have the next question, and then Abu Bakr.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. This is Rahul. So my question was about what has been the most effective recruitment strategy for you in terms of the engineering talent in Sacramento area?
So to be honest, I don't know exactly like at scale. I'd have to ask the technical recruiters. What I would say is that the first probably 20 to 30 people in the company, I went and recruited myself. So I found that like our response rate when I would reach out directly to people, and I also saw talent in people as like the key element in our ability to keep growing. But when I would reach out to people, the response rate was much higher. So my suggestion would be is if you're the founder CEO or, whatever your title is, then like you probably need to do most of the recruiting yourself. And you need to get people to believe. You need to basically pitch them the same way you pitch investors. And I think about the first few engineers that joined the company, like they were game changers for the company and they were really, really talented. And a lot of that was myself and our CTO, Ryan, like directly recruiting them.
Got it. Thanks a lot. And primarily my reason for asking was obviously Bay Area so close by. I mean, there's sometimes a direct salary comparison, and then it kind of puts it's a tough ball game.
Yeah, I mean, I think do you have are you a corporation, and then do you have a option pool set up?
Not yet. Still pretty early for that also.
So I would just set yourself up as a C Corp and then create an employee stock option pool, and then give them equity. Because people who join early stage companies, especially really good people, they want the salary, but they're not doing it for the salary. They're doing it for the equity upside. So you find people who really believe in the problem, can add value, and then you just say, hey, look, I'm going to give you X percentage. It's going to vest over 4 years. And then that if it works and you get to scale, that will be a way better outcome for them. And that also, I think, recruits the right mindset of people rather than people who want a big salary. They just probably don't understand what like early stage operating is like.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Abu Bakr, you're up.
Thanks, Laura. Well, I guess my final question was, as a SaaS company, how did you figure out your business model or business plan?
So a lot of testing, and then a lot of like, I'm pretty crazy about numbers and metrics. I think like numbers are beautiful because it cuts through all of the subjectivity. Like I think there's so much subjectivity around like people are like, how did you do this week? And if someone's like, well, I did good. I'm like, well, what does good mean? They're like, well, I got like, it's like, what's your definition of good? Is your definition the same as my definition of good or not? And I think numbers actually create clarity around that. Because if you say, how did you do this week? And they say, well, I got 5 and the target is 4, then I know that's good because it's 1 above the target. But if they got 5 and the target is 15, that's terrible. So what I would do in a SaaS company is first I would look up David Skoke, who is a GP at Matrix Partners, has a website called For Entrepreneurs, and he has basically a playbook for all the unit economics around a SaaS business and how they should look. So I would go look at that and I would get benchmark targets, and then I would start measuring those in my company and see how close I am to those or not. And then you can tell if you're doing good or bad because he has all the targets set there for you.
Yeah. And if your, for example, customer wants to do it like a paid pilot, would that be better for the, and like, how would you go about that?
I think again, it all comes back to like the metrics that we're trying to drive. So what we found early on in the company is that if people don't want to commit financially to our product, then they're actually not ready for this and they're going to end up churning anyways. So they end up like kind of half committing through a trial or like a 3-month trial period paid pilot, and then they end up leaving at the 3-month mark. And it's mainly because they didn't have the right mindset to actually resource it for the long term. But that was just our business model. I think there's lots of business models that are product led that make sense for like a trial or a paid pilot, right? To give them a taste of it. But fundamentally, it would come back to what is the customer acquisition cost with those 2 different approaches, and which one is more efficient? Which one do you get paid back on the cost to acquire that customer faster, the paid pilot or the non-paid pilot? So again, it still probably comes back to all the math around the sales efficiency and the acquisition costs.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Abu Bakr, I dropped a link in the chat that someone shared with me recently. It's 50 different business models. So go check that out. Something fun to play around with.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Laura.
And I'll put the this SaaS metrics thing. This is like the best thing for all the SaaS metrics.
Okay. And Robert, you're going to have the next question.
Could you talk a little bit about building the back office? There's accounting, finance, legal, how you're going to get your facilities and manage just day-to-day IT, HR. You focused on mission, vision, values, metrics, and so forth. But there's a lot of the fundamental stuff that any corporation has to have. You can outsource all of this stuff, or you can build it yourself. What lesson? What did you learn, and what are the lessons you'd share with us on that?
Yeah, great question. So I can just tell you what we did. So I outsourced pretty much all of it. So we had like a person or 2 internally that were the point people on it, but I outsourced the CFO function, all the accounting, all of the back office around that. I also signed us up as soon as we got to a handful of people to a PEO because I wanted to shield the liability. So we were with TriNet for a long time, and TriNet is, you guys probably know, but a PEO stands for the Preferred Employer Organization or something, but you basically share a tax ID with them and they keep you in compliance around all the HR issues, such that if there are legal issues that arise, they litigate with you and they help provide coverage. And so that's like the function that you're paying for. So we outsourced a lot of that, and most of the contractors were law, same thing, we outsourced. A lot of the contractors, we had to sort through a few of them to find good ones. Some of them were game changer in a good way though. And then as soon as we started to get to scale, and once we hired the CFO, we started building that. And we built kind of certain functions ad hoc based on need, but then once we got to a certain level of scale and resources, when we actually started building that in-house.
Thanks.
All right, Leslie, you have another question.
Yes, I do. In order to show traction on the whole product market fit, other than going after organizations one by one, going to associations with organizations that are members, and what was the third one? I can't remember the third one. How, any other ideas? Oh, the third one is doing surveys to these groups in various places online. Any other thoughts that you would have other than those approaches for going after showing the product market fit so that you can point to it as yet another way of traction for investors?
Yeah, so I think early days, you do got to do a lot of things that don't scale. So a lot, like you're right on one-on-one cold outreach, and that's just to be expected. Like you're doing things that don't scale to show traction. And then the other way I would think about it is like, these are all just channels to reach either consume, but they're all basically consumers, even in B2B. So these are just channels. So I would just look at like, brainstorm all the channels: social media, direct outreach, associations, in-person events, paid advertising, billboards, I don't know, a million channels. And then I would just like force myself to prioritize, what do I think is going to have the lowest cost and the highest likelihood of being successful. Then I would just go run experiments and test those channels. And if you test 20 of them, a couple of them are going to show signs of life. And then as soon as one starts to show sign of life, like you just triple down on it. That's how I would do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so we have a question from the chat from Srinjay. He wants to know, where do you see the influencer marketing space going in the next 5 years with web? Is it web 3.0 or just web 3? School me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. I don't have like a super well-informed opinion on Web3. I think the fundamental concept around the future of the internet will be decentralized is super compelling. And I think that is already has tremendous momentum. So I think it's for sure going to happen. I think what you'll see, whether it's called influencer marketing or something else, I think the fundamental disruption is real. And that's that people don't watch companies anymore, they watch other people. And the way that the content is distributed is not through traditional channels such as cable and television. It's distributed through mobile and social. And so you have this like fragmentation of media with like shortened attention spans. And the people that have the attention are, instead of being like MTV in the real world, it's this independent creator on Instagram and TikTok. So I think that actually is going to become much more pronounced. And I think probably what will happen in Web3 is like the power will be distributed to the creator even more, because if the distribution isn't handled through like Instagram or Facebook or an intermediary, there will be something that fills its void. But the thing that will remain is that the creator will still be there. So that's probably how I think it's trending. I don't have a super well-informed opinion on Web3. I should probably get a better one because it comes up a lot, that and NFTs. I feel like everybody wants to talk about.
Srinjay, I see that you have your hand raised now. Is there a question that you want to ask yourself? Oh, no, it's down. Okay. Alex has another question.
Sorry, I have many questions. Yes.
No worries. Keep asking them.
Okay. As you were saying earlier, 20%, 80% of business comes from 20% of customers. How do you collect
with creators? Sorry, with creators.
I mean, yeah. So how do you guys collect the feedback from your current 20%? Like, do you outreach actively and try to see, get the feedback, or you guys do focus groups? Do you connect to your current customers to collect feedback from them?
Now we do it in a more scaled way through like technology and feedback and surveys. In the early days, I would get on Zooms with them constantly. I was on calls with customers pretty much every day. And what I'm doing on that is I'm saying, okay, talk me through how you do this. You do influencer marketing. What do you do? And they'd be like, well, I go on Instagram, I find these people, I click here, I look at the direct message, I message them. Then if they respond back to me, I make a Google sheet, I put it in there. Here's my Google sheet. And so I was just constantly talking to customers and finding the problems and the inefficiencies in their process, and then working with our CTO and saying, hey, look, like I think we can create a technology solution that can automate a lot of this. And I just do that through, you'd be surprised, like people feel like special when you reach out to them, like, hey, look, I'm building a company, like, because you're already using the product. I would love 15 minutes of your time. I'm the founder. Love to just see how you're using the product and walk me through like day in the life. And then through that, you start to get an understanding of what they're currently doing. And usually it's, at least for me, it was like a broken process in these specific areas across all brands. And that's where we would go focus to try to build product to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Patrons up?
Yeah.
Okay. I have questions on a different dimension. So, you know, we've been looking into this thing called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. I think you're pretty familiar with it, right?
Yeah, I love
Craig,
it.
Yeah, Craig had was. So we met with Craig. When did you figure out that you needed to deploy something like that? What was the trigger point? How big was the company?
So EOS, for those who don't know, it's like a framework for how you run the company. It covers everything from how you structure the organization, how you meet, how you set targets. It's basically a playbook for running a business. Well, this has been super instrumental in our growth to date. We're actually, I think, hitting some like ceilings with it right now. So we're like rethinking how this will continue to evolve, but we're also at, you know, over 300 people, and we're going to 550 this year. So the company's getting a lot bigger. And so, but I would say from like up to 250 people, it's great. The problem started to materialize probably at around 15 people, 20 people. And what I started to realize was, before we would just get everyone in a room, we'd have stand up every day and everyone would stand in a circle. And we'd just say, hey, the sales guy would be like, yeah, I'm working on this. I got these deals. I think one of them's going to close. And then product would be like, well, and then, yeah, the feature is going to go live this day. And then finance would be like, whoever did that, we need to get the money from this guy on the invoice. So it was really easy to know what was going on. But then once we reached about 15 to 20 people, I realized not everybody knew what was going on. And so I needed to figure out a system that could create alignment in the company. And I tried a few, and EOS was just the best. So I would highly, highly recommend it. Once you get to like over 10, 15 people, and we're very disciplined about running EOS. We run EOS very explicitly in the whole company. Everybody does it every week, every quarter, every year.
So I don't see another hand up, but I have a question. I don't think you answered it during the fireside chat, but how did you come up with your company name?
This question comes up so much because there's so many new employees joining the company. We just thought it was like a great name that like wasn't so serious, but was still serious enough to be like taken serious, kind of tongue in cheek, happy, whimsical. But there isn't like a really cool story around it. Some people are like, you should make one up, but it feels kind of fake to make one up. But we just thought it was an interesting, cool name. The other thing is that what I really liked about it was that it didn't mean anything. Like, I mean, smile, grin, like a version of a smile, but it didn't mean like influicity or creator land or something. Like I wanted to embed the meaning in the company name over time through what we built and the products and services we delivered, rather than have somebody immediately jump to a conclusion of what the name meant.
How many times have you changed your logo or your branding, your visual branding?
Probably three.
Three?
Yeah, maybe four now, 3 or 4. We should stick, we're keeping the same logo. We're updating the visual identity, hopefully for the last time. Anytime you get someone new in marketing, they want to change everything. So sometimes you got to let them, sometimes you got to not.
Yeah, I hear that. So another question private to me in the chat from Sally. She wants to know, when could we start pitching investors or applying for incubator programs? Do we need a product? How many customers should we acquire, I'm guessing, before pitching to investors or applying for incubator programs?
I think it depends on the incubator. Launch, as an example, like you have to have a product in market with some small level of traction. I don't know how the other, like YC and the other ones work. Oftentimes people want to see a product not because it needs to be like groundbreaking or anything, but it's quite hard to build a product with, like, it shows a certain level of kind of hustle and determination if you can get a product built on like a scrappy budget and make it happen. But I don't know about every accelerator. At launch, you had to have a product in market and with a little bit of traction.
Yeah. And maybe on the when should you pitch to investors, we actually have a couple of recorded workshops on that, but there's a difference between what angel investors, they typically invest earlier stage, and venture capitalists, you usually need some traction. What would you say about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you can kind of find people across both, but I think generally speaking, angel investors are going to take risks earlier, and more traditional VCs are going to want to see more proof of momentum and traction. But there also are institutional investors who invest kind of pre-revenue and very early stage. Mm-hmm. But it is a different approach for each. More institutional investors, I think, there's a lot more diligence, a lot more research. Angel investors, I think, fall into 2 categories. One is where they do a lot of diligence and number crunching, which I've never gotten that along with that type of investor. The other one is I just call them cowboys, because they just believe in the founder, or cowgirls and cowboys, and they just make bets. Like, they're like, I believe in this person, I think he's going to make it, I'm investing. Those are the type of investors that I liked in the early stage, because I found when people got too number driven, they just would say no. And there's not a lot of like positive proof in the numbers in an early company. There's just not.
Exactly. That's what I've always heard. I mean, I know there's angels who invest what I'd say later stage, but if it's truly pre-seed, they're investing in the team, basically.
Yeah, the market and the team, for sure.
Yeah, and the idea. Speaking of investors, I've had a lot of entrepreneurs ask me, like, how much money should I raise? And I've given them some counsel on that, but I'm interested in your counsel. Some of them are like, well, I only want to do it once, so I'm going to try and raise $3 million right now, even though I'm not even to market yet. So how did you decide how much to raise and when it was time for the next stage?
Well, there's a lot of like conventional wisdom or like feedback, which is like, you want to raise enough money to show the milestones to get you to the next level, which is very sound advice and is very practical. The way that I always approached it was, what's the most amount of money I think I can raise at the best price, and then I'm going to deploy that capital. And then I think this is, again, if you want to only raise money once, you shouldn't raise venture capital, because you should find someone who cares more about running a profitable business, cash flow, and you should run a profitable business that spits off profit and cash and generate wealth and revenue through dividends from that. It's very different than a venture-backed company. A venture-backed company, the primary way that you're generating the return for the investor is by growing the valuation, which in turn grows the stock price. Because of that, you are going to want to show very high growth, and you're going to raise lots of money follow because you're going after a huge market where growth drives the multiple. So you should just understand what kind of business you want to build first. I would say if you want to only raise money once, you probably don't want to build a venture scale business. You want to build a great, profitable software company or technology company, which some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know, that's what they do. And they've done it 3 or 4 times and they're crushing it. It's just totally different.
Yeah. All right. We've got another question in the chat from Srinjay. He'd like to know, does the creator boom economy, and as more people become creators, does that dilute the value of creators following if they are monetizable? Did I get that right, Srinjay?
I think I get the basic idea. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, does the creator economy become more diluted over time if there's too much advertising through it? I think probably what you would see is that the market would respond in kind, right? Like it's the creator's job to have a trusted relationship with their audience. The way that you build a trusted relationship is by providing value to the audience over time through content that people engage with. If all you're doing is talking about products and trying to advertising to them, for lack of a better word, constantly, the audience is going to tune out and you're going to lose your relevance. So I think it's a suitable question, but I think the onus is on the creators, and the best creators don't just talk about brands and products they like all the time. They have a focus and they deliver value that is irrespective of that. So I think the market will sort itself out on that over time.
Have we reached the end of our questions?
Well, I was going to say going, gone.
We should give Cameron an opportunity if he's been sitting there quietly the whole time. Cameron, you got a last question?
Not necessarily a last question.
Or a question?
Questions have been great. I think I go back to the grind of the fundraising game and the many no's that you got. The question I have is related to, did you ever get investment from someone that was a no originally that turned into a yes? And what was that? How did you maintain that relationship as a founder with those investors?
Yeah, a lot. Like a lot of the people who invested in Grin originally told us no, or they just went dark. Because what ends up happening with investors, especially institutional investors, is they want optionality. So they're going to say, this is an interesting company. I don't have enough conviction to invest now, but I don't want to shut the door on them forever. So if I respond and tell Brandon, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm a no for these reasons, then I've effectively shut the door on myself. So, and that we've had people tell us no and then invest in the future. But so oftentimes what they'll do is they'll actually just stop responding. 1, because they're super busy. 2, because they want optionality in the future. So they just go dark and ghost. So the way that I've dealt with that is I've done monthly updates every month since we started the company. On the 15th of every month, it goes out on the 15th. I've never missed a month for 5.5 years since we pivoted. Actually, since I started the company, since I raised money, 7.5 years through the whole pivot, I've never missed 1 month. I paused for 3 months while we were going through our latest transaction because our lawyers asked us to for some reasons around kind of corporate compliance and governance and stuff. So what I would do is I basically would have a redacted version of that monthly update, and it would be a little less information, and I'd put all the people I met with on my monthly update. And then I already had this process where I was updating people monthly. And then I grew a big list of people who I had talked to. And then my monthly update would go out on the 15th of every month. And so it kept me top of mind. And then it also proved to them that I actually did what I said I was going to do. Because I said, hey, I'm going to grow the company by this much. And then they would see 6 months would go by and they would go up each month. That built a lot of credibility by the time we'd end up wanting to go raise again, because they knew, 1, that I'm responsible because I actually consistently do what I said I'm going to do. 2, we're driving growth. 3, it becomes a warm intro because they kind of feel like they know you because they know how you communicate and that you actually do consistently communicate.
Thank you.
Got to unmute myself before Jeff closes this down. Okay. Going, gone. Oh, Brian had a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to, if you're going to want to answer it, because it's
Who's
Brian.
your best investor?
Why don't you ask it, Brian?
Brandon, how you doing? Just wondering who your best investor is and who's your worst, and definitely name names.
Oh, that's funny. I won't answer worst.
But is there
I think
a worst? Will you at least tell us if there is a worst?
Nah, there's no worst. They're all good. I think anyone who believes in the company enough to put money in, like that's such a huge, awesome signal. It's like honestly humbling, because even if you invest professionally or you've had a lot of success investing, like still it's a big commitment. So anyone who's invested in Grin, I'm super thankful and proud to have them on board. There's a bunch. I mean, I personally have a little bit of like a unfair advantage around a Sacramento investor named Brian Vale, who led our seed round. I think he had a lot of conviction and commitment. And when things got really hairy and we had to pivot, he didn't get scared and back out. He said, like, I believe in you guys, like, let's make it through it. Where a lot of people, when things go sideways, I think don't have that calmness to them. They start to get worried about losing money, and he did not do that. So I think he's probably the best because he invested early and continued to back us at the early stages.
And there was one more question from Abu Becker. He wants to know, when did you know it was time to incorporate?
We incorporated when right when we started the company, just because if you want to raise outside capital, you need to be a corporation because you have to be able to issue stock. You can't do that with an LLC. And we also just wanted to be, I guess, buttoned up and thoughtful, and we were serious. And so we incorporated from the very beginning. We were a California corp, and then in one of our rounds, we had to switch to a Delaware corp. So if I go back, I would just incorporate in Delaware. Because you're going to have a point anyways. Institutional investors will want you to. So that was when we did it. I see the last question too. Do you want me to answer that, Laura?
Yeah, Srinjay's question about convertible notes, that one.
Yeah, let's do that and then wrap it up.
Okay. I don't know if this is already asked. Did you ever take investment with convertible notes? How did you navigate the going rates, the valuation cap? So yeah, we've done convertible notes. Convertible notes, for those that don't know, is basically a debt. It's debt, but the intention is that it converts to equity. So you're not really raising debt. The valuation cap is just negotiated with the investors. So, and there's like an interest rate, but the interest rate's nominal compared to the cap. But the valuation cap is negotiated. If I were doing it again, I wouldn't raise convertible notes. Then the more common structure now is called a SAFE, a super or simple agreement for future equity. And it gets rid of the whole like ticking time bomb of a debt instrument. And I would just do a SAFE. And that's commonly accepted now.
And if you want to know more about those, we have a recording from, I think, our last office hours event. If you go to startupstack.com and the office and search for office hours, find out there's a recent video taped about that.
And I'm gonna put my email address in the chat. There are a couple of people were asking me for links to stuff, and I just couldn't answer them while I was doing this. But feel free to.
It's tough to multitask everything.
Yeah. Feel free to email me, laura@startupsac.org, and I can connect you to all the resources available in the Sacramento region to help you as entrepreneurs, or at least all the ones I know about, which is a lot.
It is a lot.
I would just say, well, one comment. I know we're going to end, but thanks, Laura and Jeff, for setting this up. I think for anyone on the call, like, I would just, not to say that anyone needs advice, but like 100%, it can be done. You can do it. And it takes effort, energy, and focus and luck. And it might not work out on the first one, and that might not work out on the second one. But if you just don't stop pushing and trying, it will happen eventually, and you will build a company that's valuable, and it will work. It just might take time. So I know if you're already scaling or if you're starting early, like, it's fraught with anxiety and it's hard, but the rewards can be really fun. And the upside is big. And I would just say, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. And it sounds kind of cliche and dumb, but it's just not true. You can do it. And it just takes focus and effort.
Well said. Great attitude. And thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate you taking your time to share your insights and your experience. Running Startup Stack, we really appreciate the startup founders like you who take the time to give back to the community and help other up and coming entrepreneurs. So really appreciate it. It's great for the whole community.